There's moral justice and there's legal justice. And when that not guilty verdict was rendered, I felt legal justice was done. As far as moral justice, I haven't discussed it with anyone, including my wife.
Doesn't sound so confident in his client, does he? Welcome back for part 3 and hopefully the finale of the OJ Simpson saga. Now, we left off last time covering the science used in the actual criminal trial itself that determined that OJ's blood was not planted by the LAPD, the real-life police squad. Now, I realized I forgot to clarify something in part 2, and that was that Detective Mark Furman was taken to court for perjury, which he pled no contest for. And perjury is basically intentionally providing false information in court, which he committed by lying about racial slurs he used, which were actually recorded. So he's a bit of a dickhead, but he was not found guilty for planting evidence. There is no record of him ever being caught doing that. But just like OJ Simpson, that doesn't mean he never did it. With that said though, I don't think it would have been possible for the LAPD to plant this much evidence. If you've seen the photos, it's a fucking bloodbath. Alright, moving on. The DNA at the scene was proven to be OJ Simpson's with a 1 in 9.7 billion chance of error, and the levels of EDTA in the DNA exhibits were all normal and consistent, except for just the 2 that a guy named Dr. Reader, ironically, could not read properly. Once everybody figured out what mistake Dr. Reader made, then they realized, well, the levels of EDTA are consistent throughout all of the samples. And if anything was planted, the levels of EDTA would have much likely been 100 times higher. So that means the LAPD didn't plant anything. Now, other than the DNA evidence, what else was there that the prosecutors thought could put all orange juice away forever? Well, the bloody leather gloves, one found at the crime scene and the other found at OJ's house. The Dream Team theorized that if OJ tried to put these gloves on and they did not fit, then surely the jury would acquit him, because he could not be the killer then. So they had OJ try him on.
We asked him to straighten his fingers and extend them into the glove as one normally might put a glove on. Yeah, I object to this statement by counsel.
All right, he appears to have pulled the gloves on, counsel.
And well, they seem to fit.
Like the defining moment in this trial, the day Mr. Darden asked Mr. Simpson to try on those gloves, and the gloves didn't fit. Remember these words: if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
What the fuck are you even talking about, man? Those things are quite clearly on his hands.
It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Damn it. What? He's using the Chewbacca defense. Why would a Wookiee, an 8-foot-tall Wookiee, want to live on Endor with a bunch of 2-foot-tall Ewoks? That does not make sense. But more important, you have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with this case? Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it has nothing to do with this case. It does not make sense.
I feel like my intelligence is being insulted right now. This feels the same as when people say, you know the earth is flat, right? And then you show them a video of a ship sailing over the horizon, and then they say, well, you know, the government builds those ships like that on purpose so that they sink after going over the horizon to confuse the globe earthers and keep them doing whatever they're doing. The question here isn't, hey, Mr. Orange Juice, do those gloves fit comfortably? The question is, do they fit? And they do. And if you think that the struggle here is real, you do realize that he's a paid actor, right? You know that he's Nordberg in the police squad. He's not a very good actor, but do you think that this guy is just going to put these gloves on without putting up a little bit of a fuss after he went on that Bronco chase, after he almost popped a cap in his own head, after he allegedly killed 2 people? Do you think that this asshole is just going to slip these gloves on and say, yep, I murked them both. It was me, like he's a villain from Scream or something, revealing his master plan? Well, anyway, the Dream Team claimed that the glove found at Nicole's condo did not fit OJ's hand. In response, the prosecution theorized that OJ had not been taking his anti-inflammatory medication for his arthritis, which they believe would have made his hand swell and made it more difficult to try and put on the glove. The Dream Team then got medical records from the Los Angeles County Jail doctor, which confirmed that OJ was actually taking his arthritis medication every day. So why didn't the gloves fit then? Well, if you have a pair of leather murder gloves at home, you can run this experiment for yourself. But since these gloves were frozen to preserve the DNA evidence, and then unfrozen, and then refrozen multiple times, it just shrank. OJ also probably made a poor attempt to put them on. I mean, it is his life that he is fighting for here. But Cochran then famously stated during the defense's closing argument, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Damn, you gotta admit that that's actually really catchy. What do you think the prosecution was saying? If it do fit, he a piece of shit. Because the prosecution brought a fresh, brand new pair of the exact same gloves, same brand, same material, same size, and they asked OJ to put them on. And they fit OJ just fine. They could have even added an additional lyric to the song. If we find multiple photos of you wearing a size 12 Bruno Magli shoe, then we know that the piece of poo who killed these two was actually you. Well, they should have focused on these shoes because these shoes is what lost OJ the civil trial. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Honestly, it's irrelevant because at the end of the day, this jury was not convinced that OJ was responsible for the murders. I'll remove the names of these jurors, but one said that she thinks that the blood belonged to Simpson's children. Even though killers don't share identical DNA with their children, in fact nobody shares DNA, everybody's is different. But fair enough, the OJ Simpson trial was one of the first high-profile cases where DNA played such a crucial role. So maybe the people back then just didn't understand it how we understand it today. Then they should get off the fucking jury then. Another juror said that she thinks Simpson's blood was left there next to these bloody footprints prior to the murders happening. If that was the case, I am positive that OJ would have had some ridiculous excuse like, oh, I slipped and cut myself on Nicole's body when I heard she was murdered. And finally, the jury foreman said that she had no explanation for the incriminating evidence, but that it did not factor into her decision of reasonable doubt. So basically just how the average flat earther responds to actual evidence and solid proof, by just ignoring it. Even though OJ was acquitted in the criminal case, in October 1996, the next year, he was sued by the victims' families for wrongful death, and a civil trial began. This jury, however, would find him responsible for the deaths of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, and they awarded the families $33.5 million in damages. So what happened here then? How do we get a drastically different verdict for the same story? Well, OJ Simpson probably would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling size 12 Bruno Magli Lorenzo model shoes that came back to bite him in the ass. According to the website Highsnobiety and an article written by the writer Alex Banks, quote, unlike the criminal case, this was the first time jurors had an opportunity to hear OJ speak for himself, after he was deposed for days on end by attorney Daniel Petrocelli. Law experts who have looked back on the civil case have applauded Petrocelli for his tenaciousness and his ability to ask Simpson questions that didn't allow him to simply recite a pre-rehearsed narrative. While other lawyers may have simply looked to rattle Simpson's cage by being combative, Petrocelli once again returned to the physical evidence as a means for proving Simpson's guilt, specifically the vaunted size 12 Bruno Magli shoe print, and how the prosecution was never able to prove that Simpson actually owned a pair. During the deposition, Petrocelli questioned Simpson if he ever purchased a pair. Simpson obviously responded no. Like any good lawyer, Petrocelli had just laid out a trap for OJ, and he waited for him to walk straight into it. Now Dingbat here was absolutely adamant that he didn't own a pair, but Petrocelli produced a photograph in which Simpson is clearly shown wearing Bruno Magli shoes while attending a September 26, 1993 Buffalo Bills game, 9 months before the murders. Now OJ sees this and says, quote, it appears to be me, yes. Petrocelli then asks, quote, looking at the close-up of the shoes, can you believe that those were shoes that you owned at that time? OJ then replies with no, saying that these shoes he was wearing must have been something that he borrowed or was given by a personal assistant.
Did you ever buy shoes that you knew were Bruno Magli shoes?
No, because I know if Bruno Magli makes shoes that look like the shoes they had in court that's involved in this case, I would have never worn those ugly-ass shoes.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it was so important to get this asshole in these shoes that an FBI agent took a look at these pictures. FBI Special Agent William Bodziak matched 18 different features on the shoes OJ is wearing in this photo with the distinctive characteristics of Bruno Magli's shoes. Bodziak identified the angled heel, the waffle pattern sole, the deep stitching groove, and other features that he said were proof positive OJ was wearing a Bruno Magli. Bodziak concluded with, quote, "Based on all of these characteristics combined, I was able to determine that the shoe depicted on the right foot of Mr. Simpson in that photo is a Bruno Magli, Lorenzo-style right shoe. The left shoe, while less clear in the photo, was also a Bruno Magli." Now, OJ's defense refuted Bodziak's claim by saying that the single image had been doctored and was probably fraud, and their intention was to portray their client in a negative light and give the prosecution what many believe to be the smoking gun. And that was their biggest mistake. Because during the Christmas recess of the civil case, Daniel Petrocelli found an additional 31 images which showed OJ Simpson in these Bruno Magli shoes. After the recess, Daniel Petrocelli called OJ back up to the stand, and he said, quote, "Now, Mr. Simpson, you said that the first photograph was doctored. Are you saying the next one is doctored? And the next one? And the next one? And the next one? How about this one? And the next one? And the next one? Another one? And how about this one? You orange-juiced bastard." Anyway, they did this repeatedly until the jurors couldn't even look at OJ anymore. And apparently, according to Daniel Petrocelli, they started looking down at their own shoes. And it was as obvious as it could possibly be that this witness, OJ Simpson, was lying. As part of his final remarks to the jury, Daniel Petrocelli stated, quote, "If the photos are real, you are looking at the man who killed Ronald and Nicole. Innocent men don't lie. Guilty men lie. He's done in by his lies. Those shoes will not allow Simpson to run from the truth anymore." Damn. That's even better than "if it do fit, he a piece of shit." Well, it's been a hot Kentucky minute since I've done this, but Mr. Daniel Petrocelli, you get the Mystorian's official pap of approval. Then on February 4th, 1997, this jury found OJ Simpson responsible for the homicides of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, and they ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages to the families. Would it surprise you to hear that OJ would ever only pay the Goldman family a total of $133,000 and about $114,000 to the Brown family? But with interest, the total has since ballooned to well over $100 million.
I got totally screwed. I got screwed, you know?
Kinda sounds to me like you screwed yourself. Now, what happened pretty soon after is honestly the most intriguing part of this whole story, because according to Kim Goldman, and according to the website Radar Online, Robert Kardashian instructed his heirs to turn over a mysterious bag to the Goldman family following his death. But that didn't happen when Robert Kardashian died at age 59 in 2003. Kim Goldman said, quote, "We were notified by either a lawyer or someone from the Kardashian family that Robert wanted the bag to be given to us. Kim then even arranged for the delivery of the missing luggage and added, quote, at the last minute, we were told it wouldn't be happening. I have no idea what was in the bag. As for why they didn't want us to have it, someone must have told them that it wasn't the best decision to give it to us. I've always wondered what was in the luggage bag, and if it did indeed hold the murder weapon that was used to kill my brother and Nicole." Well, according to the ever-trustworthy and credible Kim Kardashian, apparently it was just some toiletries and some golf clothes. What? Does this make sense to anybody? Why would Robert Kardashian want to give Kim Goldman some toiletries and some golf clothes? And if it was just toiletries and golf clothes, why didn't the Kardashians give it to them then? Anyway, this is the mysterious bag that she's referring to. So of course, some people believe that OJ used his luggage to stash away the damning evidence, including his clothing and the murder weapon. Author Dominic Dunn said, quote, "I do wonder, however, if Kardashian could have played a role in the removal of the murder weapon from the golf bag, of course the knapsack that he wouldn't let Alan Park load into the limo, from the golf bag that arrived at LAX the day after Simpson's return from Chicago, when he and Simpson, in the midst of his mourning, went to the airport to pick up Simpson's golf clubs." End quote. It's a pretty good point. Why didn't he send like an errand boy or some shit like that? Anyway, after the double murders, Robert Kardashian was famously photographed carrying this Louis Vuitton garment bag, which some suspected contained the clothing OJ wore on the night that Nicole and Ron were killed, as well as possibly the murder weapon. Some other people think that the murder weapon wasn't in this bag, but stored away in a $5,000 vintage Louis Vuitton briefcase. One insider said this was a red herring. Robert made a big show of carrying this thing around, which set off wild speculation about the case. The prosecution also believed that the knife OJ used to carry out the murders was also hidden in this elusive $5,000 briefcase. Additional photos of Robert Kardashian and OJ Simpson after the murders show Robert Kardashian holding onto a Louis Vuitton briefcase while sitting in the back of a car with OJ. What's really interesting about this though is that Robert Kardashian was never seen holding onto a similar briefcase ever again. So again, if OJ was truly innocent, what's up with all the fucking smoke and mirrors and performances? Well, fuck me, because he was acquitted, right? Anyway, this is where things get truly disgusting in my opinion. In 2006, OJ's eldest daughter, Arnell Simpson, who is not by the way the daughter of Nicole, but she's the eldest daughter of OJ Simpson and his first wife Marguerite Whitley. Now Arnell testified in a deposition that she and Van Excel, which I at first thought was a type of medication, but it turned out to actually be a person named Raffles Van Excel, the president of Raffles Entertainment and Music Production, came up with the idea for a book called If I Did It, which was supposed to be OJ's account of how he would hypothetically kill Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. I wonder where she got that idea from. Maybe it was from this skit that Chris Rock did in 1999.
Hey! Who can forget the night OJ came by to sell his new instructional videotape? I didn't kill my wife, but if I did, here's how I do it. Crazy!
Now, according to Arnell Simpson, she allegedly pitched this idea to her father in an attempt to make money. Fucking disgusting. She testified that her father thought about it and eventually agreed to the book deal. Dingleberry said, quote, "I have nothing to confess. This was an opportunity for my kids to get their financial legacy. My kids understand. I made it clear that it's blood money, but it's no different than any of the other writers who did books on this case." End quote. Do not project your bullshit onto us. Just because every time in your life you did something shitty, people seem to look the other way and say, "Oh, it's fine, you're famous, just carry on being a cunt." People cover stories like this because we believe that the victims need justice. Some people cover it for money, that is true, but perhaps some of the people who wrote these books and articles on the OJ case are just over people's bullshit. People like you. Also, what about your fucking football and acting career? Why couldn't that be your kid's financial legacy? Is it because you pissed it all away by being a fucking idiot? Fuck this guy. Anyway, OJ says in this book that he has an unwilling accomplice named Charlie who urges him not to engage with Nicole, who OJ apparently plans to scare the shit out of. Some people have speculated that this Charlie character is OJ's way to disassociate from the crime, and that Charlie is just a figment of his imagination, kinda like Tyler Durden from Fight Club. It's because in the book, nobody ever actually interacts with Charlie except for OJ. Now we all know the first rule of Fight Club is "fuck you Charlie, don't tell me what to do," so OJ ignores Charlie's advice and continues to Nicole's condo, where he finds and confronts Ron Goldman. Nicole then falls and hits her head on the concrete, and Ron crouches in a karate pose. OJ then says, quote, "Then something went horribly wrong, and I know what happened, but I can't tell you how," end quote. He then regains consciousness later with no memory of the actual act of murder. Now, according to some sources, Ron Goldman was a third black belt in karate.
Objection!
Kim Goldman, his sister, has stated repeatedly that that is not true. According to Kim Goldman, quote, "Back in 1994, we didn't really have the internet as we have it today, right? Now you can search through blogs, comments, Reddit, the access is just ridiculous. With that comes a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of mistruths," end quote. Anyway, a writer named Pablo Feñez ghost wrote the book based on interviews with OJ. The publishing deal allegedly started when Regan Books employee Judith Regan received a phone call from OJ Simpson's lawyer, who said that OJ was ready to confess to the murders. Regan claimed that the word "if" was put in the title so that OJ would have plausible deniability, when his children read the book, because, quote, "he couldn't tell them that he had done it," end quote. Now what the fuck is going on? Because I thought the book was the kid's idea. They apparently pitched the book to him as a hypothetical scenario, so they knew about it. And before he wrote it, he said it was blood money. Whatever. This waste of paper that some poor trees had to die for was then scheduled for release in November 2006, But finally, something right happened for once in the story, and the book was cancelled due to public outcry. Then, in September 2006, Ron Goldman's father took OJ back to court to obtain control over OJ's right to publicity. This whole, finally something right happened in the story was good while it lasted, all 5 seconds of it, but then the first edition of this book was then published in November 2007, and after the Goldman family got the rights to it, they renamed it to If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer, but they reduced the size of the word if to such an extent that it's barely visible at a first glance. The word if has been hidden in the large red letter I, making the title appear to read, I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. No additional material was added or changed, but additional commentary was added by the Goldmans, the ghostwriter Feniers, and the investigative journalist Dominique Dunn. Now, I have had to skip over quite a lot of other criminal charges where he's been fined or questioned or taken to court, but as is tradition, people just keep letting him go, and he just keeps doing his thing. But then on the night of September 13th, 2007, a group of men, led by OJ Simpson, entered a room at the Palace Station Hotel Casino and stole some sports memorabilia at gunpoint. Shocking. Can't believe it. This guy, who's had more run-ins with the law than your average Grand Theft Auto character, did another shitty thing. What are the chances? Now, this crime resulted in OJ being questioned again by the police. Simpson admitted to taking the sports memorabilia, but he said it had originally been stolen from him. But he denied breaking into the hotel room and also denied that he or anyone else carried a gun. 2 days later though, OJ was arrested, and long story short, Simpson was charged for multiple felony counts, including criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, robbery, and aggravated assault. He could not bullshit his way out of this one because there was actual video evidence. He was then finally sentenced to prison and stayed there until he was paroled in 2017. Now, like I said before, the murder weapon was never found. It could have been disposed of at LAX and then Robert Kardashian came to collect it. The killer could have also hidden it somewhere else where nobody has ever thought to look, or it could have been shot into space. Nobody knows where this knife is, but in one final strange twist to the story, in 1998, OJ sold his Rockingham estate and the new owners planned on razing it, which means to destroy it. Sometime in 2002, while construction workers were there, a construction worker found a 5-inch buck knife buried on the property. He then took it to an LAPD officer, who then called his supervisor, who said, quote, "We don't want anything to do with this knife." Of course you don't. We don't want anything to do with this. OJ Simpson has been acquitted. There is double jeopardy. Even if the knife had blood all over it, there is nothing we can do. End quote. Without the LAPD, a lot of unsolved mystery channels would just have nothing to talk about. The cop who was given this knife by the construction worker then just decided to keep it in his toolbox until 2016, until he remembered he had it and wanted to display it in a frame as like sort of an artifact or something, even though no one believed that this knife was the actual murder weapon. However, another cop then found out about this and said, "Hey, you gotta report this." Well, presumably, he said, "I already did report it." And the other cop was like, "Yeah, those lazy cops from 2002 are gone now, report this again and do the right thing." So the cop did, and he handed the knife over. The LAPD captain at the time, Andrew Neiman, then said in the press conference, quote, "It has been submitted to our lab. They are going to study it and examine it for all forensics, including serology and DNA and hair samples." Now, the main reason I'm bringing up this story is because while in jail, a prison guard and OJ's self-proclaimed best friend, Jeffrey Felix, said OJ heard about this and said, quote, "If the knife is rusted, I cannot be busted." Come on, man, is that the best you got? That's not nearly as catchy as "if it do fit, he a piece of shit," and "these shoes will not allow Simpson to run from the truth anymore." If the knife is rusted, I cannot be busted. You can't even print that on a t-shirt. It just sucks, man. Jokes aside though, what this shows is that this asshole was clearly having a lot of fun with this murder shit. Of course, what I mean is this "If I Did It" book, the stupid little rhyme "if the knife is rusted, I can't be busted," and of course the infamous interview with Ruby Wax, where he pretends to be Michael Myers. And also celebrating and taking photos with people the very next day after being acquitted, which even his lawyer Robert Shapiro said was in poor taste.
How did you feel when you saw OJ laughing and posing for pictures shortly after the verdict?
I thought it was inappropriate. 2 people were dead, and there should still be some respect, certainly for your ex-wife.
Now, if you're wondering what happened to Robert Shapiro, why didn't he defend OJ again in the 2007 trial, the one about the criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, aggravated assault, and sports memorabilia? Well, it's because, firstly, OJ didn't ask Shapiro to, and secondly, Shapiro wouldn't have anyway because OJ owed him a lot of money. Anyway, back to this rusted knife. Even if it was the murder weapon, OJ couldn't have been retried for the murder anyway because of double jeopardy, which prevents people from being tried for the same crime twice. Alan Dershowitz, former member of the Dream Team, said, quote, "The type of knife discovered will be the key. The only way it will be relevant is if it has some kind of serrated knife blade that they say was consistent with the wounds. It won't change the verdict, but it might change the verdict of history. But most people already think he did it. For those who think he did it, this will just confirm it. For those who think he didn't do it, they will just say it's the LAPD again trying to frame him. I don't think it will change much in terms of the way people think about it." End quote. Fair enough. In the end though, the knife turned out to be unconnected, but the points discussed here are still relevant. If he did it, and it was proven, nothing would have happened anyway. So if OJ did it, and it seems pretty fucking likely like he did, he got away with it. In closing, a guy named Mike Gilbert said in the finale of the Netflix series that one evening he worked up the nerve to ask OJ what actually happened, and told him to his face that he always suspected that he was guilty. Now, according to Mike Gilbert, OJ said, quote, "If Nicole wouldn't have opened the door with a knife, she would still be alive." Now, I've read that Mike Gilbert has been called out quite a few times for talking bullshit, so I don't know how trustworthy he really is. So did OJ actually say that? Who knows? But based on everything we've covered, I would not be the least bit surprised if he actually did say that. Anyway, I'm fucking sick of talking about this guy now. Now, with everything I've found, everything I've read, and everything I've covered, I am 99.9% sure that he was guilty. But what do you think? Feel free to add your thoughts and theories down below in the comment section, and I do have another question for everybody. One story that I'd really love to cover is Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders, but I've held off on it because at the moment my script for that is about 40 pages long. So my question to you is, did you guys like this sort of mini-series on the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? And would you like something like this as detailed and in-depth on Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders? Let me know if you think that sounds cool or if you think that sounds like complete dog shit in the comments. I'd really like to cover the Jack the Ripper mystery because there is a theory that I am a big fan of. But the theory makes a lot more sense when you cover the entire Whitechapel mystery. And for that reason, that video would be an excruciating experience for both me and for you, because it'll be like 3 or 4 hours long. Instead, like I did with OJ, I could separate it by victims and developments. So yeah, again, just let me know if that sounds cool or sounds like shit. Also, feel free to share your thoughts and theories on the OJ Simpson case in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys again soon with another mystery. Thanks for watching.